Good morning. We're on Facebook Live this morning. It's my first time at this, so please give me a break. Wake up, sleepy heads. I've got a couple people here as my audience to help me out and give me moral support, I hope. Hope you've had a good morning. It's a beautiful morning in Kentucky, and I hope I have some listeners from Florida and one from Myrtle Beach as well. So let's get started. This morning's lesson comes from 1 Samuel chapter 17, verses 38 through 49. And we're going to talk about David and Goliath. And it's probably something that most of you have heard since you're a child throughout your life over and over. But it seems like every time you study something in a different stage in life, that you get something else from it that you just haven't heard or it hasn't pertained to your life. So I want to get started a little bit this morning by doing a little bit of the backstory of what we've studied before to catch up with where we are. A couple weeks ago we studied about Samuel anointing David as the king of Israel. And we know at that time Saul was the king of Israel. And it was a very scary thing for David to be anointed to be the king when there was a sitting king. You know, it was dangerous for his life at that point. You know, it would be like if you name another ruler when one's in power, and we see in other countries how that doesn't do so well. And I want to go back and tell you the last week. Very scary. The last verse that was studied was Samuel 16, verse 13. And in that verse it says, "From that day on, the Spirit of the Lord came upon David in power." So now we know that David's 15 years old. He's a very young man. He's been a shepherd all his life. He's tended sheep. He's been in the field with the flocks. This power as a king that he's been anointed for is something new to him, but he now has the power of the Lord to help him do things that he can't do on his own. And if you know from your own life, we can do a whole lot of things with the power of the Lord that we can't do on our own. And we need that, and we need that strength to do that. So, like I said, we're looking at 1 Samuel chapter 17, and we're not starting until verse 38. But let's go back and look at the beginning of chapter 17. And it's always good, I'll give you each time like what we're going to study next week, but it's really good to read the verses in between because you have an idea of what's happening, of what has happened, and to set up and help you understand a little bit about our lesson. But in the lesson, we hear that the Philistines have come against the Israelites. And if you know, if from reading the Bible, the Philistines were kind of a thorn in their flesh, and there was always problems that they always seemed to crop up, and they were an enemy that always gave them problems. So it says that they're camped in the valley of Elah, and the Philistines are on one side, and the Israelites are on another, and they're kind of at a standoff right now. They're I guess they're not wanting to go to war. And it has to be a difficult thing. Of people that have been in the service know these things. But during this time, there's the Bible calls it a champion named Goliath, and he's a giant. It says he's at least 9 feet tall, and he comes out every day, and he ask if there's anybody from the Israeli army that's willing to come up against him. They're offering, if you can beat Goliath, if you will be willing to go up in battle against Goliath, and if you can beat him, then that will settle that war. The countries won't go to war, but if you can go against Goliath and beat him, that you're going to be the winner of this war between Israel and the Philistines. And as you know, from things that happen in your life and things that come against you and you're kind of scared or unsure of, if something brings it up over and over every day, it kind of builds the tension up. So I'm sure when Goliath came out every day against them, they were scared. There's a song that I was going to play on the piano this morning, but my daughter told me not to after I played and sang it to her last night. She said it wasn't a good idea. But it's The Voice of Truth, if you want to listen to it. I think it's Casting Crowns on YouTube. But it talks about the sound of 1,000 warriors shaking in their armor, wishing they'd had the strength to stand. Yeah. And that's what's happening here. These trained, seasoned warriors are scared to go against Goliath because he's a giant, trained, seasoned warrior. And he's goading them every day. Come out and fight me. Come out and fight me. If you can beat me, you know, you will take the spoils of this war and you'll be the winner. So none of the warriors have been able to do it. Even King Saul himself is not able to go against him. So we see David, his brothers are in Saul's army. 3 of his oldest brothers are in Saul's army. So David is out tending the sheep. His father gives him some food to take to his brothers, and he sends him to the front to give this food and to, I'm sure, check and see if how well they're doing, because you know you're going to want the safety for your children. So David comes out bringing his food with him, and when he comes out there, he sees what's going on. He sees Goliath goading the Israelis to, you know, come out and fight me. And David, and we remember we said from the last that the Lord came upon David in power. David said, hey, let me go. You know, he's a 19-year-old boy by now. He's not a warrior at the time as far as battle strictly this way. But he has been a shepherd all his life. And he told the king that he has protected his sheep. He's killed bears. And, you know, he is able to do these things because he's been the protector of these sheep for this time, and that he has had to go to battle hand-to-hand combat with them, and that he thinks that this will help him go against Goliath. So, you know, and at first the king's like, no, you're a child, and anybody would say that. I mean, some 19-year-old comes up. Oh, yeah. But, you know, at 19, we all think we can go against the giant sometimes, though, whether it's always true or not. But, so when we start out this lesson today, the king has given in and he's going to allow David to go out and do this. I get, you know, for lack of nobody else is going to do it, and even the king himself hasn't been willing to do it at this point. So we're going to start the lesson. We'll go through the verses on this lesson and discuss them, and then there's some questions at the end of this that we'll go over and see if we agree with come up with the same thoughts and stuff on this. So starting in 1 Samuel 17, verse 38, it says, and Saul armed David with his armor, and he put a helmet of brass upon his head. Also he armed him with a coat of mail. So you know the king of all the armor that all the soldiers are wearing, the king is going to have the best of the best. And he's putting this on David because he wants him to have the best chance to make it that he can. He wants him to be armored and to go against Goliath. In verse 39 it says, and David girded his sword upon his armor, and he essayed to go, for he had not proved it. And David said unto Saul, I cannot go with thee, for I have not proved them. And David put them off. If we remember, Saul is a big man. When they chose Saul to be king, he was a very large, strong, warrior-type guy. David, as we know from our last lessons, he's a smaller man. David, you know, when the Lord picked him, and the Lord went to David's family, or Samuel, the priest, went on the Lord's behalf and chose David. There were other brothers that were more bigger and mighty structurally and features than David, but the Lord didn't choose them. The Lord chose David for his heart and what he knew that David was capable of doing, not on David's physical appearance. So, that, you know, David has this armor of this big man on. He can't wear it. You know, if you went out, say if you're a hunter and somebody, you had practiced with a gun and you were a good shot and somebody said, well, here, take my gun hunting, you're not going to want to do that because you're more comfortable and you're practiced with what you wear in your armor and stuff. So David takes it off and he's thank you, but I can't wear this. He couldn't hardly walk well, and he gets out with the giant. At least on his own, he could have run away if he had to or tried to, but with this armor, he couldn't do it. He couldn't fight, and he couldn't flee with it. So it was, not something that David wanted to do. And it said, and he took his staff into his hand and chose him 5 smooth stones out of the brook and put them in a shepherd's bag which he had, even in a scrip, and his sling was in his hand, and he drew near to the Philistine. So David wants to fight with his own armor, with what he's been equipped with throughout his life and what he's practiced and what he feels comfortable. So it says he took his staff, and the staff's something that they lead and guide the sheep with. So that's something that he was real comfortable. He knew what he could do with this. And then he had a slingshot that he had used before. But he gathered him up some weapons. It was talking at that time, it was hand-to-hand combat. They didn't have guns like they do now. It was hand-to-hand. They had spears or javelins that they used. But this slingshot, I was reading in the book here, and I had never thought of it like this. They didn't have bullets and weapons to shoot, but this sling was the next best thing because it was going to be a projectile, and it would go and it would hit somebody at a distance. You didn't have to touch them to do that. So he has the best weapons that he's been trained with in his life. And as we said, he's not a trained soldier. He just happened to come upon this scene to help his brothers. But, I think he came upon the scene because it was the Lord's will for him to be here at this place at this time. And it said, and the Philistine, in verse 41, came on and drew near unto David, and the man that bare the shield went before him. So here comes big Goliath down after him, advancing toward him. So he gets a good look at just how big he is, and this man has his shield bearer in front of him. So, he has every piece of warfare on him. That David has his shepherd's instruments on him, and the Lord's help. And when the Philistine looked about and saw David, he disdained him, for he was but a youth and ruddy and of a fair countenance. So the giant has tried to pick a fight, and the best he can get out of the Israelites is a little 19-year-old boy that comes down there in his shepherd clothes. And he's a little mad just because of that. He's insulted, I guess. It's the word that they've sent this man to fight him. So, and that's going to build Goliath up even bigger. He's sure there's no contest here because, they've insulted him with this small man that they've sent out. And the Philistine said unto David, am I a dog that thou comest to me with staves? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. So he's roused it really bad. And he's like, am I seen as such a small problem that you've come out with this stick to hit me with? And which, if you think about it in our perspective, there's no contest there. I mean, if you just look at it from man's earthly eyes, why would you do that? He can't handle this. Verse 44, and the Philistine said to David, come to me, and I will give thy flesh unto the fowls of the air and to the beasts of the field. So he's wanting to get his hands on David. I said when I was young, me and my brother fought all the time, physically. He was 4 years older than me, so I had to learn real quick, you don't get in arm's distance or you're gone. and Goliath knew this. He's like, just come upon me. If I can get my hands on this boy, it's over. Because there was such a physical difference in him and such a overpowering that the Philistine knew he had over David.
He needed an Alaskan stick, didn't he?
Yeah. Then said David to the Philistine, Thou comest to me with a sword, and with a spear, and with a shield. But I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. And think about this. It would be a scary situation, as I'm kind of scared to speak this morning, being the first time on Facebook, so I have no idea what he did. But David, because he had the power of the Lord, he was able to speak to this Philistine and say, I'm coming after you in the name of the Lord. And and he said this in authority, and in his mind, you would think you're out there in front of this giant that your mind would be so garbled and you'd be so scared. But he's saying, I'm coming after you in the name of the Lord. I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. So he's saying, you come out here, you've mocked the army of my God. And and he says it in no uncertain terms. And it doesn't, the speech here to me doesn't sound like he had any fear in him, that he knew what he came, and he came to defend the Lord's army. Verse 46, it says, This day will the Lord deliver thee into my hand. So he's sure what's going to be the outcome of this. He didn't come thinking that he might win. I will smite thee and take thine head from thee. And I will give the carcasses of the hosts of the Philistines this day until the fowls of the air and to the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. So he's saying, I've come to get you today. I will kill you. I will show the world that the Lord of the heavens, and if we think of the Israelites past, once they left Egypt, when they came into the land of Canaan, they had many victories over the Canaanite. That they didn't have the resources. They went into the land of the Canaan. When you go on somebody's homeland where they've got their walls built up, they've got their defenses, they're on their own turf. That they've really got the upper hand on you from the start, because that they've prepared their homeland for it. And the Israelites have marched into this land, and they've defeated the walls of Jericho that they said were not, nobody's able to penetrate these walls. They shouted the walls down. And I think the Philistines have to have heard these things and know, and seen before in past battles that the Israelites had the power of God. And in this case, it was a single man that was bringing this power of the Lord to show them and to show his strength.
With faith.
With faith, yes. He definitely had, he wasn't iffy on it. Verse 47, And all this assembly shall know that the Lord saveth not with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. So he's saying that I don't have to have the mighty weapons of battle that you men think win wars. And it came to pass when the Philistine arose and came and drew nigh to meet David, that David hasted and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. So Goliath got up and he started advancing toward David, and David didn't turn and run the other way. He went forward toward him. And we've talked about and all the sword, the Bible that the Lord's give us, and his Spirit, and all that he gives us. He armors us for forward battle. It never mentions that we have armor on the back. So it's a forward battle that, once you engage in the war, you don't turn around and run at any point. You stay prayed up and you go forward. in your war. It says, and David put in his hand in his bag, and took thence a stone, and slang it, and smote the Philistine in his forehead, that the stone sunk into his forehead, and he fell upon his face on the earth. So David, I don't know if the Philistine, he saw David coming toward him, and he saw his staff, and are you teaching me? Don't know exactly if he saw that little sling, or if David kind of just walked and had a sling in his hand and pulled it out and shot it at him. But, David took his one shot, and he hit between that armor exactly where that it would make the fatal blow to this Philistine. So we know the Lord was with him in that. He had given him these victories in the past. He had, as a shepherd boy, we think sometimes through life that we're not sure why we are where we are, why we're maybe not advanced more in our career, or maybe that we've had that, I should be rich and living here. But, the Lord gives us experiences to learn how to handle what comes to us later in life. And as we see here that had David not had these experiences, and had he not had the lions and the bears in the past that he had fought, that maybe, he wouldn't be such an accurate shot, and he wouldn't have gone through this. So the Lord sets us up throughout our life, even though we always don't know it. He gives us the opportunities. Sometimes we see things, the troubles that we call us, or trials that he puts before us. They're for a reason. They build us. They put things in our life, and they make us able to handle things that we're going to come for in the future.
Make you stronger in the future.
Yes, yeah, they make you stronger, and they make you. They give you a boldness. And if we read the lesson, the verses we had, but if we read farther on, once David did this, the army that had stood shaking in their armor, as they had said in the song, they became bold, and they went forward, and they pursued these Philistines out of this land. So sometimes, if you look at it, one person's boldness can help a whole army. I mean, you might think that you're going through an illness, and I know my mother-in-law, when she was really sick, and she would go to church and stuff, and people would say, I can't believe she's up there singing, or I don't know how, because she couldn't breathe. And it would give them boldness to do the things, because they were in good health, and they weren't doing the things that they could see her doing when she couldn't do it. Dale and Donna here are an example of that. Sometimes you don't feel like getting up and going on, and you might think, how can I praise the Lord when I have this illness? Yeah. But the Lord is going to take you through it, as you all tell. Without him through an illness, how can you make it? You can't. So we look at David, and not only has his boldness helped him, but it's also has affected the whole army that he's gone.
It's like being in church when they have altar call. Nobody wants to go up, but one person will go up. Then you'll have maybe 5 or 10 more people follow.
That's true. That's true. Because when the altar's empty, it's kind of scary to go up front and do that until somebody says. This lesson ends up, this is David later on in his life, as he's grown in the Lord. And David is known as a man after God's heart. Yeah. And I thought about that a lot. To be that person, and to try to be who the Lord considers a man or a woman after his own heart. That's who I want to be. It says, the Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer. The God of my rock, in him will I trust. He is my shield and the horn of my salvation, my high tower, my refuge, my Savior. Thou savest me from violence. And we're going to go ahead and study David's life out, but we'll see that there was a lot of violence in David's life. He came into power, and even before he came in, while Saul was still the king, Saul didn't like him, and Saul didn't, want someone named king. He enjoyed that position after he got it. And so David went through a lot of battles and fought a lot for Israel. But, David always turned to the Lord. And even though David messed up a whole lot like we all did, he always turned back to the Lord, and he asked for forgiveness for these things. And, and I think that's what the Lord likes in our heart, is that we're humble and that we're willing to admit our mistakes. We're going to make mistakes, but that we're willing to admit that we've made them, and to turn and to try to not make that same mistake over and over, though sometimes we will make the same mistake. But here are a few questions for discussion that we'll go over before we finish. And we've talked about, and try to answer these at home. How did Saul prepare David for battle? He was a shepherd. He taught him throughout his entire life how to do battle. He had to protect these sheep. Sheep are really, from what we read, pretty stupid creatures. They don't mind real well. They're not very savvy at protecting themselves. So, David was prepared all his life by learning to protect these sheep. It says, how did David choose to go to battle? David chose to go to battle on his own terms with his God-given gifts that he was. He didn't try to be somebody else, because you can't do that. The Lord gives us each gifts. I try as hard as I can to play the piano, but I'll never be like Dale on the guitar. And you take what talents you have and you make the best out of that, and that's what David did. How are we Christians to be attired for battle against sin in the world? So we should read our Bible first and foremost. Being around other Christians, being in the midst of other Christian people, living for the Lord, listening to the Lord as He leads us, are ways we can be attired for battle. How was David's way the best under the circumstances? It was normal to him. It was the best way that he could battle. It was, like I said, he wasn't going to be somebody else. Why was Goliath sure he would conquer?
Well, David didn't. When he went out there, he didn't want the armor on him, because it would throw his balance off and mess him up. So, like you said, he went as he was. He knew he had God on his side, and the giant, had all the armor. And he just thought he'd pick David up and break him in two. It was a joke to him, and they didn't have God on their side.
Right.
When you're with God, who can be against you? So he went out there with that on his mind.
Goliath came out with a haughty pride about him, that I'm big and he's not, and like you say, I could break him in half.
Big and bad.
Yeah. His bad self came out. Why was David sure he could conquer?
He had God on his side. He prayed.
He knew he had God with him.
And who, I think I forgot to read our lesson aim for the week. It's, if God be for us, who can be against us? And David knew that. David lived that for that. So David was sure. What previous experiences gave David assurance that God would help him? And our lesson here, I'll read just a little bit. It said, he had before experienced the protection of heaven in two conflicts with a lion and a bear, which he had slain when they rose up against him. And he doubted not that God would crown him with similar success in his conflict with the uncircumcised Philistine. So when he fought this lion and a bear, he didn't have a .357. to shoot him with. He fought the lion and the bear. And that's what we were talking about, past circumstances that, you know, gave him a boldness that, you know, the Lord helped me not be eaten by these things. Where did David place the credit for his victory?
With the Lord Jesus.
Lord.
Okay. In verse 47, and he says, "And all this assembly shall know that the Lord saveth me not with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hand." So he's given all the glory to the Lord. He's not taken any thing on himself that, you know, because I'm so bad I did this, that this was the Lord that did it. So hope you enjoyed the lesson this morning. Next week we're going to talk about Saul trying to kill David. It's going to come from 1 Samuel chapter 19, verse 1 through 12. So if you have time during this week, if you will read over the lesson, and if you will even read in between to see what's happened. If you find that you might want to come be at our Bible study, we have a book. All the verses are coming strictly out of the Bible, and they always will from our Sunday school class. But we have a Sunday school book that kind of gives us a little more information on the culture of the time when we do it, and helps you understand a little bit more about what you're reading. So we will plan to see you hopefully for our service this morning, and at Sunday school next morning at 10. Thank you.